This is The Way We Roll with Simon Minty and Phil Friend.
Welcome to The Way We Roll with me, Simon Minty.
And me, Phil Friend.
Our guest is a colleague, but he is also a friend. It's hard to put him into a box with a single job title. So we've used some words from his LinkedIn profile, and concentrate, listener, because there's a few. So words like brand, strategy, creative, design, user interface, social, identity, art, and innovation.
Now, we first met John in the early 2000s via the Business Disability Forum. He was co-head of a design agency called redesigning, and they specialize in business improvement through brand design, marketing, and digital innovation.
And we ran events with him on inclusive design called Beyond Big Type, which was such a great title. I used to always get excited because I'd put my sort of creative media suit on when I was doing those rather than my regular business suit.
Now, John works with high-level individuals and organizations to, I quote, optimize growth and success using brand design and digital innovation.
Now, our regular listeners will have noticed we have changed recently. We used to be the Phil and Simon show with a photo of me and Phil looking at each other.
And now we are The Way We Roll. And John was instrumental in rebranding us, coming up with a design and identity and helping us switch all the social media and other channels over to the new situation. So, John.
Hello.
It's brilliant to have you here, and thank you for giving us your time and so on.
Well, it's great to be here. I'm a fan of the show and a regular listener, so it's good to be here.
To know. We thought we'd just kick off really with asking you how you start working with people like us. I mean, there's me, who's 123 years in his sock. He's got this rather lovely middle-aged chap.
It likes detail and quite annoying.
Yes.
And we make podcasts, as you know, and we talk about disability incessantly, and we sometimes make each other laugh, and quite often we make each other annoyed. So, I mean, how did that all come about? Were we easy to work with?
Were you? It's a loaded question, is it? You were fun to work with, and I kind of I'd worked with you ages ago, hadn't I? And I'd wanted to work with you again. So when Simon came up to me and begged me to do it, I was more than happy to. Actually, it was enjoyable. It was, you were very honest. I knew you really well, which was really helpful, I think. And when it comes to branding, that's kind of really important, how much you understand what people are all about. So yeah, it was good fun. And it was a little bit of hard work. It's a little bit awkward, like nothing's painless when it comes to branding. But it was good. Overall, I think it was good. And I'm pleased with what you've got.
Do you think, John, you're a bit like me and Simon? We used to have this sort of mantra that we wouldn't work with people we didn't like. Do you know what I mean? Does that work in your environment?
Well, I used to have that as an ideal, but when my business started growing, I suddenly found I was taking on work for the sake of earning money. So it's a lovely ideal, and I'm at a space now where I kind of can do that more. So it's quite a nice time. But no, I did get to the point where I was just churning work. Some of it I didn't like, just to keep the machine oiled, so to speak.
And the imagery that you came up with for us, and then obviously we discussed some of it, but you immediately had an idea, and there was a kind of a concept and a style almost, and then there was the orange and the various other bits. How did you not create that? How did that come to you? What were you thinking of?
Yeah, well, it wasn't about you. I just had an idea I wanted to run with, really. So, no. Well, the funny thing is, because having known you so well, I kind of saw you straight away as a double act, right? So years ago, I'd worked back in theatre and events marketing. So I thought, this is great. This is like redesigning for Tommy Cooper or Ken Dodd again, so I'm going to Cannonball or something. So I thought this was brilliant. So I just went straight back to all those references and those old film posters from Morecambe and Wise and the Three Stooges. And I just thought that just felt about right. I wanted to do something that didn't feel corporate and electronic and neat, because you're not neat or corporate or electronic. So I kind of wanted something that felt quite organic. And so I went straight back to those as references. I pulled up some other bits and bobs as well with some old jazz posters, some kind of communist posters for to reference Phil, obviously, there. and a little bit of young stuff as well I threw in, even though, you know, just thought it should appeal on some level to young people for some reason. But no, so I just went straight back to that. I mean, because your brand is so well defined of what you know, the way you come across. And I look at you and I think about you and I start chuckling and I smile a little bit. And that's really nice. So I just went with what I felt was right, to be honest. But then, you know, just worked it up from there.
Which is really lovely, and thank you. There's lots of kind of sweet compliments in there. But nowadays, I mean, the image you come up with reminds me of a poster of those times, and that's what it's about.
Yeah.
But presumably now, are posters done, and it's about leaping off that little screen in our hand?
Yeah. So with you, I mean, every client is a slightly different approach. With you, because you're just an online, you know, a product or service or kind of a broadcast, I just went straight across everywhere you might appear, everywhere people might find you, and there's not one bit of print on there at all, really, obviously, but I just mapped them all out, took screenshots of everything, just thought, how do I make this work across all those channels? I think there's something like 17 of them in total, including Facebook, and there's you know, there's Twitter and there's everything else, and I just looked at that and thought, how can I create something that is a bit more distinctive, that practically works, that can be consistent, and that kind of reflects your personality across pretty much all of that.
I can't believe there's 17. That's remarkable.
Up on the hoof, by the way. I think it's probably about 10, but I thought 17 sounded more impressive. Yeah.
What that makes me think about, John, is then how do you stand out in such a crowded field? Do you know what I mean? What were you thinking about how we would be noticed, aside from the clear work you were doing on the graphic and stuff?
Well, I mean, I think when it came to the naming, I think I wanted to run with the name The Minty and Friend Show, didn't I?
You did, yeah.
Because I thought that what you have as your advantage is you two. And so that for me is a unique, something unique that no one else has. And Minty and Friend, because you were called the Phil and Simon Show, weren't you?
Yeah.
Yeah, and Phil and Simon aren't unique names. You know, it's no more unique than the word John, as we talked about. It doesn't sound that interesting, but Minty and Friend, I thought was great. You know, it's you, and that's what's special, is your relationship together, and your agenda and the way you do it, and your wit and everything else. So I wanted to run with that, but actually, so I think you are the thing that stands out, or trying to capture a little bit, which is why your faces had to be there and your names had to be in it as well, for me.
Yeah, and you reminded me. I remember one of the conversations it was like we were going to take over the world. We'd be doing international tours and shows as this Minty and Friend brand.
It's really ambitious, isn't it?
Yeah. And me and Phil were like, well, we're okay with the podcast now, John. But
oh, no, I had you in Las Vegas and all kinds of places.
We got a residency. Elton John. And then
it'd be Minty and Friend on the following week. Absolutely. Yeah.
You said for having a view of a business. I mean, going back to your business life, much more than the stuff.
Yes.
There's something about inspiring a dream, isn't there, that you could be different and bigger and better and stuff. Presumably that's a huge thing that you do for companies. If you went down this route, you might get gigs in the O2 Arena or whatever.
Well, I've never met anyone who's running a business or has got something that they're putting a lot of effort into that doesn't really kind of think they can be better than they are. It doesn't have a bit of a dream. Yeah. So I think you've got to be realistic, but I think, if I can help people to kind of get to where they'd like to be or where they think they should be. And a lot of people they're not clear about that vision. I can kind of help them with that a little bit. But if they are, sometimes their brand or identity just is kind of holding them back. So if I can say this, and this, will all join up, and it will give you a better chance of being more successful and reaching more people and making a bigger impact. Everyone's eyes light up, you know. It's like it's just the way it works.
I totally get that. I think we're going to come back to, because you're a lot broader than what we've just talked about in terms of what you do, but also I know the work that you've done with us, it just makes you kind of go up a level. You feel a little bit smarter, a bit more professional, a little bit more, I don't know, you can take on the world. Whereas before it's me and Phil sitting looking at each other. It's very different. You
weren't far off. You were pretty good as you were. Obviously, what you do is great. But there was just, when I looked across everything you already had, a lot of it just didn't join up and just lacked credibility, lacked quality a little bit. You weren't far off. It just needed making sense of.
This is The Way We Roll, presented by Simon Minty and Phil Friend. You can email us at mintyandfriend@gmail.com.
We're going to go to your new work, but let's go back a bit. When we did the stuff with the Business Disability Forum, do you remember Beyond Big Type? And
I do, I'm afraid. Yeah, it seems like about 20 years ago now.
It must be
20 years ago.
I don't know, 15-ish. Now, again, we always have to remind the listener, this was a particular time. People were talking about adjustments and employment, but no one was talking about comms. No one was talking about design, accessible design in terms of that communication and print and so on. So how did you come up with Beyond Big Type? What was the purpose for you?
So in 1997, I won a contract to help a London local authority to kind of make sense, a little bit like you really, to make sense of their brand and identity. Wasn't renaming them, wasn't coming up with their logo, but they were all over the place from a point of view of how things looked, the way they came across from a quality point of view. And when we got the piece of work, or I got the piece of work at the time with my business partner, Peter, on the brief, it said, just as a small line, and make sure it's accessible. So I went to them, I said, what do you mean by that? And he went, I've no idea. I said, we just put it on there because we're a labour authority and we should make it accessible. And then he pointed me at the RNIB, and they had at the time a little booklet, which I think it was called the See It Right Guidelines.
Yeah.
And it was kind of one of the only things that was out there. And I looked at it and I read it and I could see the intention was good, but it said things in it like, no type should be less than 12 points. All letters, you can never use capital letters. It's a very, very simple, it kind of showed you how to design a poster or, a record cover or anything, And I just kind of sat there and thought, that doesn't make sense to me. And so I started to contest it. And the Beyond Big Type was kind of a response to clients just writing on a proof to you, make this type bigger.
Right.
And I just thought, well, you can't do that because that's body copy. And if I do that, there's a relationship between the intro and the headings, and everything has to go bigger to keep that hierarchy, because that's really important in design. And they would go, how do you mean? It's got to be, and Leonard Cheshire came to us and said, make our newsletter more accessible. It was all in 12 point. And I said, well, you need different headings, you need more space, you need a whole range of stuff going on. And so I went across to the Royal College of Art and met Professor Roger Coleman. And Roger is the guy who's credited with coming up with the phrase inclusive design. And he and his colleague Professor Julia Kasim, I sat and worked with them for about 5 years on and off. And they were just brilliant and they inspired me. And I just kind of thought, designers aren't doing it. Clients don't quite get it. So I took on this kind of evangelical mission to kind of broker between designers and clients. So, for the benefit of people who are actually using the materials at the end, the end user, I guess, is what you'd call it.
Which is probably why we love you and love what you do. And we've got another colleague, David Bonnet, who does architecture, and his is make it accessible, make it beautiful. And that's what we kind of get with you. It's not Absolutely. Make it bland and accessible. It's how do you make this fabulous and interesting and completely accessible?
Well, I felt everyone was concentrating on the practical, the kind of the basic functional side of communication. Like that Beyond Big Type used to split into 4 parts, didn't it? The first part was about understanding. So people started to appreciate that it isn't just about visual impairment, there's cognitive, Then there was a piece called Inform, which was all the practical, it needs to work and you need to be able to get access to the information. But then in the afternoon, we go into Engage, and the qualities that design brings, like making it interesting, desirable and distinctive and memorable and beautiful. There's that, it's a little bit, I used to use an analogy like of food and say, don't just give people bread and water. It just seems a bit patronizing, give them, everyone deserves a full banquet kind of thing. And that's the way I was thinking. And then at the end of that, there was a whole bunch of stuff around which formats do you use? Yeah. So there's a whole range of stuff that needs to be considered. But yeah, I just wanted to say, don't throw out all the good things, beautiful, engaging things that design adds, just for the sake of having some functional information.
You remind me, one of the bits we used to do, which is your thing, where you'd identify sort of 12 created customers or users, and there'd be Aunt Flossie, who still likes her newspaper and listens to the radio. And then there was Mahal, who is always kind of out and about, and he uses his Walkman or his MP3 player. And that was kind of making these people real, so we could keep using all the different formats as well. It wasn't just reducing it, it was making it broader. I mean, that concept of individual people, is that yours? Was that other people's? Was that the way it was done?
No, well, I came with, but I don't know if it's mine or not, Brody, but I went to, Julia sent me off to meet a lot of artists, right, who were blind and visually impaired, and I became friends with a couple of them. But I sat, one of these guys, he just said to me, well, you can't come up with one answer because everyone's a bit different, and I don't want this. I went, oh yeah, of course. And then he said, and he started talking to me about colour, and I kind of, I mean, this is really naive of me back in the day, but I hadn't assumed that anyone who was blind, colour mattered to them.
Right.
You know, I mean, it's very big. And so it changed the way I thought. And I realized that you couldn't just say, make everything this, and therefore it works. You had to understand that everyone's on a scale of cognitive, sensory, physical abilities, and everyone's a bit different. So yeah, that was really important to me. And I think I started calling it design for the individual. But in fact, it's now the big thing. Everyone accepts that you're not trying to come up with a one-size-fits-all solution, but if you can set things up so that it shows you really understand an individual, and that's commercially great, isn't it?
What launched a lot of that stuff back then was this concept of reasonable adjustments, wasn't it? You had to make websites accessible. You had to also, and you've explained beautifully the kind of rush for everything has got to be in Arial and 12 point. And if you failed to make a reasonable
yes.
I remember Simon and I looking at the designs you did for us at Wired, back with the Wired design for Minty and Friend, and it was radical. It was very different. And I remember saying to Simon, because you're right, you know, I am the one in the room going, what about, you know, this? I said to Simon, but it's in italics, for God's sake. And it's not, you know, blind people supposed. And Simon very absolutely said, there are ways of making it accessible for people that need that without us having to do everything in one document kind of thing.
Absolutely. I mean, I think I used to show Simon, didn't I, the 2 album covers of the Sgt. Pepper's was one of them, and Never Mind the Bollocks was one of them as well, wasn't it? And a beautiful, graphic, iconic covers. Yeah. And then I used to show them done by the RNIB guidelines that would tick a box. Yeah. And they were both white with, or just off-white, in fact, with, you know, dark grey text in Arial at 12 point. And you just start to see, that just doesn't work.
You've also reminded me, I think there was an image of maybe 20 different CDs. Now, they were all done in the accessible format. And they're just the spine of them. Yeah. You couldn't make head nor tail. No. It was impossible to work out. Then you put them as they were, and every single one of them leapt out at you. You could see what was what. Yeah. Yeah,
all apart from the George Michael one, which was called, ironically, was called Older, and it was done in a 5% tint off black or something. So you could, you know, or 95% black off 100% black or something. You couldn't read it at all, which I thought was lovely. Done by a friend of mine, actually. But anyway, but the I just thought it was really important to kind of challenge some of these things and just show it's not that simple. And what used to happen as well is I would get invited in then. So all of a sudden, then we went to the Royal College of Art and we got awarded a brilliant prize on inclusive design by, and Sir Terence Conran was there and everyone. It's really important. Radio 4 mentioned it in the morning the next day. And it kind of led to us. People started ringing me up and saying, can you come in and sign off on some of our designs, like Ticket, you know. I'm going, well, that's kind of not what it's all about, really. And the problem you would get is that designers would design something without really understanding the possibilities, okay? Because it's really quite interesting and more challenging if you take on the challenge. And then clients wouldn't really understand the possibilities of design, and you'd end up with this conflict where the designer would compromise slightly, make the tab a bit bigger. The client wouldn't be fully happy. No one goes away happy, and the end user gets something which is kind of a bit of a mush. So that was my agenda. But way too often I got invited in by people, Natural History Museum, to mention no names, and said to say, can you just sign this off? And I wanted them to get the design teams to work with disabled users before they even started putting something together.
Isn't you were not about a sort of kite mark stamp of approval. You're about, let's do it properly. I was really glad that you were doing it. I always think disability is the unsexy one, and you were bringing sexy to disability and design and accessibility, which is always cool, because I
got sucked in, to be honest. I started enjoying it, and I met some wonderful people, and it was challenging at times. And I got invited to some great places, but I just got really sucked in. I got a bit disillusioned at one point when I kept getting referred to the disability officer for companies. So a big company would ring up, BT, whatever, B&Q, and they'd ring up and they'd say, "Can you come in?" I go, "Yeah, great. We're going to talk at top level about how we can change things, and we're not going to compromise on the beautiful design qualities." And then they put me up in a room with a guy with no budget, and say, tell him how to do it, and he would say, "Well, can we have it 12-point?" And you'd end up going around in circles a little bit. So I did get a bit disillusioned at one point.
Because you've worked in both spheres, the disability world, and you've worked commercially in the non-disability world.
Yeah.
Have you formed a view on whether there is an actual business case for companies to take disability seriously? Because it's a big question. Simon and I have been asked that question, I don't know how many times. So why shouldn't we ask you it? I mean, do you sense that money can be made by getting inclusive?
Okay, so Roger always used to bang at Haddon Hamlin Centre at Royal College Bar. Used to bang on. They always used to go about the business case and talk about OXO good grips and a whole range of different things that have been a success and everything. But when I started, I now remember thinking 10 years later, well, I said, you've been trying to bang on about this business case. If there was a real business case there now, and there's demand, it would have happened, wouldn't it, naturally? If there's a social need, and then there's a commercial desire, I reckon there's a part often that overlaps. And that's a really fertile ground. When I think if you work in that space there, where social need overlaps with commercial desire, I reckon that's where it sits. And that's what I'm going to focus on. That's where I'm getting quite excited about over this. Partly I've had time to think of this lockdown, but I think that's the area. I think yes is the answer. There is a case. And I think it's because people either get siloed in the disability area, or they get obsessed with the commercial and then think, oh, let's make it a bit work for disabled people. I want to explore that area in the middle, and I'm quite excited about it. That's
the bit you just mentioned about being sat in front of a disability officer, and I have a fear that can be also with diversity now. And really, that role of that disability or diversity person, if you're one of those people who's listening, your role is to bring John to the in-house design team or the in-house comms team, or to bring to meet the procurement person. It's not for them to be the end point. They're meant to be bringing the two parties together. Yes. So you speak to the right people, and then it becomes built into everything that they do, rather than both you and the disabled person banging on the door.
And it's about understanding, and it's understanding the opportunities, because I think the more people understand on both sides, the better chance you've got of doing it. It's not really just about saying, I've done that now. It's about properly understanding,
This is The Way We Roll, presented by Simon Minty and Phil Friend. You can email us at mintyandfriend@gmail.com.
I kind of suspected this, but I didn't know until I started doing some research about you. You got a bit of a jazz background.
Cool jazz. Yeah, yes.
You got your black roll neck on for us today.
I have my trumpet down here by my side, actually. If you want a little number, I can get that out for you.
Do you play? Are you musical?
Well, so what? I was into music from being very young. I think my dad had the whole family playing musical instruments, and he used to take us around like a little band to show off. When we were a bit like the Partridge Family, but a bit more ugly, So. He used to take us around at Christmas, and I got lumbered with the cornet at the time because there was a brass band locally. but I wanted to play trumpet. So I moved on to trumpet, and I was playing trumpet one day in this music shop, and a guy walked up to me and he said, I'm in a pop band. Do you want to play trumpet? Because we need a trumpet player. I went, oh yeah, that sounds cool. And so I joined, and I got more and more into jazz. Because if you play trumpet, you kind of get into jazz. That's just what you do.
Who was that? Where? Oh, who was the band?
Just in Warrington.
Oh, I'm joking.
Oh, where? Oh, sorry. I thought you said where?
No. I was going to say Johnny Hates Jazz, but that was too yeah. Okay. Sorry, John. I've messed it up.
No, that's all right. It's all right. So yeah, no, that was it. So I joined, and and it was brilliant fun, really. And it was a pop band, and it was called Explained Emma, which you will never have heard of probably. But we entered a competition that time in Star Group Northwest 83. It was, and we beat Rick Astley to win it.
Wow.
No.
Yes, and we were offered a record contract in Italy as part of the deal. Peter Warsman was judging at the time, but he didn't sign us. He signed Rick Astley.
Mm.
So I know it's weird. But then jazz trumpet was my thing, and I left and joined a jazz band, and I ended up setting up a small jazz club. I booked Ronnie Scott when I was 21, paid him, and it was brilliant. Yeah, it was great. All in Warrington, so introducing jazz to Warrington.
You worked with a trumpeter, and now I need to get these pronunciations right. Wynton Marsalis.
So I've not worked. So I found my way into, after setting up this jazz club and promoting some events, I got heavily into promoting and doing publicity and marketing for these events, which is how I got into publicity and marketing in the first place. That's a weird connection.
Gotcha.
And I became a publicity and marketing officer for a venue in London. And, I was promoting some of my heroes, like Wynton Marsalis, Chick Corea, Sussy came on there as well. He was all the big names,
You say Sooty?
Sooty, yes, and Sweet. They were a double act. Still going.
That's nearly how our poster turned out, wasn't it? Yeah.
It was going that way, actually. So I met some of these people. I worked backstage. I was a production manager. I was doing promotion, publicity. I learned loads in that time, because you would market. I was doing PR, so I would market a show, and then if you walked into a show with one of your heroes in there on the stage, and you only had the front row sold, that was an immediate reaction to, I've done a crap job at publicising this show. Design, marketing, publicity, all that stuff. So I worked with some great people there. It was at the time when Macs was first kind of coming out into the market properly. And we bought one at this venue. And the old days we were doing, kind of the old cow gum and stick and lick and liaison with repro houses and everything. And so I kind of learned all that, which is great. And then this Mac came out, and it just had like 16 levels of grey, but you could do things with type. And I thought, this is amazing. So I would stay every night for about 6 hours for 4 years, constantly upgrading, constantly teaching myself. Ended up, whilst I was at the theatre, with kind of my own business, almost overlapping it. So I kind of knew I was going to set up, and it's where my passion was.
You did some graphic language. I had no idea. You said cut and lick and repro, and I didn't know what you were talking about.
Yeah, it was the old days when you used to kind of just stick things on a board with type on a board and the pictures on a board and mark things up, and you would send them across to the printers and say, this is how I wanted to put this together for me, basically. The
name Maya Angelou is in your list of previous lives or contacts. How did that come about? How did you meet her?
Well, again, she was just she's a hero of mine, Maya Angelou, but she was one of the people, I met her a couple of times, had the privilege of meeting her. Again, at this theatre, we promoted her, but to be honest, she didn't need much promotion because she sold out in about 10 minutes. Right. But she's great. We had some brilliant people there. We had some not so brilliant people there, but we used to have a motto saying, we'll get everybody on the way up or the way down, so...
I wanted the dream. I wanted the dream. My dream was Maya sat you down one day and said, look, this trumpeting and jazz is all very well, but you need to get into disability and accessible design, John. And you went, all right, Maya, I'll do it for you. And here we are.
No, not quite. But yeah. It's amazing.
We're up to date. You're inspired by social challenges, and you just said a lovely phrase that, if there's a social need and a commercial desire, there's a sweet spot in there.
Yeah.
So now being inspired by social challenges, what does that mean? What do you gravitate towards?
I talked about this sweet spot, or this kind of fertile territory between kind of commercial desire and social need. And one of the areas I think that's strongest is with the aging population. So I'm really passionate about working on issues around the aging population. You know, people have been on talking recently about this shift in this, in the way that the aging population is going to go, and the triangle, the pyramid is going to slightly invert. And I remember, you know, talking about this back in Korea about, I don't know, 10 years ago or something, South Korea and Japan. You know, we were over there talking about the same thing because they have a super aging population. But it will prove the commercial case for me. And I think it can be a great way of pushing the case for disability, because of course, older does not mean disabled, as we all know. But if you look at those graphs, the correlation after 65 just gets quite steep. Mm-hmm. So I think that's an area I'd like to focus on. So there's a new organisation at the Royal College of Art called Design Age Institute. And the guy who's going to run it, I've worked with as a client on several occasions. And I'm quite excited about this organisation. So I'm kind of hoping I'm going to be getting involved there in some way, which is quite good. I'd like to be working with the Research Institute for Disabled Consumers. I think, you know, I mean, Phil, something
conflict here, conflict.
Yeah, absolutely conflict. Yeah, all over the place. But I think it's got huge potential, and I'd like to, you know, and I've spoken to the guys there a little bit. But I want to do some work with them, which is great.
So you've clearly got not a lot on, really. You're very
well. I've got my mind doesn't stop whizzing around.
I think just to touch on one very important area you mentioned, and that's that aging population thing. And
yeah,
RIDC would be very, very interested to talk to you about some thoughts. We've been looking, as you know, at the longevity economy. Simon and I have talked about it on the show.
Absolutely.
Things. And it's a hugely rich area. And it may well be that is where there's an interface between disability and non-disability, but there's a lot of common ground. So we'll have to see how that shapes up.
Yeah, that's exciting times, I think, really, in that area. So, yeah.
Obviously, I've known you for quite a while, John, that you're someone who is outside this area, but the way you talk about it is so natural. And also your language and the things that you use around this are just spot on. I never have to worry about you not getting some of the, what I call the disability 101 bits. It's I like people.
I don't know what that means, but there you go.
Well, I like people who have a completely different profession, but then can double over into the area of disability and get it and speak the language and get the basics right. But you're also moving into mentoring, into sort of life coaching. Is that right? Am I putting too much on that?
No, I mean, I've been asked by a couple of people who run businesses just to kind of, because most of what I do, because I've run a couple of businesses, which is great, and a lot of what I do touches across the top of all businesses. And I think I've got some skills. A couple of people have asked me to kind of help them out a little bit, to just kind of just be a sounding board. So it's interesting. I'm flattered if somebody asks me, but it's not something I'm going to really throw myself at. But I'm more than happy just for someone who as long as I like them enough to be a sounding board and to give advice if I can. It won't all be good advice, but yeah.
I take your point. It's more about responding rather than something you're pushing wholeheartedly.
Yeah, I think that's right. That's probably a better way to sum it up.
But I also, the whole bit you do, which is around sort of understanding someone's identity and what makes them tick and what they're all about, is so powerful, so useful.
Yeah, no, I think it is. I think understanding, I mean, all those, I mean, brand, I mean, I try not to call it brand because people think about it in different ways. People do think it as identity. But understanding why, I mean, you know, people talk about brand purpose, which I tend not to use as well because it's a bit, most people in business have some ambition. Doesn't have to be a social purpose, but they have a vision. Sometimes they lose that vision, it gets a bit blurred. So if I can help them to kind of regain that clarity and to find a way to kind of help achieve it. Some of it is, I've got marketing, I've got business, I've got brand, I've got technology is a big thing that I do. A lot of that is really useful to most businesses. So if I can bring some of that to help people out, that's, I'm more than happy to do it.
Well, we'll definitely make sure that everyone listening to this show gets, your contact details and so on. So take, a conversation further.
That would be great.
I think one thing I would say about you, John, that I don't know you as well as Simon does, but I'd echo very much what he just said, that your passion for this subject is what really, really matters to me. I think you just give a damn, and you've clearly learned so much over your lifetime that you're now sharing with people like me and lots of others. So long may it continue. I think people like you around us make sure that we have the best tools we can have for communicating the messages. And I think brand and identity really help with that. So it's been fabulous working with you. I've really enjoyed the way we roll work because it was great fun. You're fun to work with. That's important.
Well, no, you were fun too. I love you guys too. There you go. How about that?
Our listenership is very broad, and there'll be Joe Schmo, who's your regular disabled person who is listening because they like it, and then we've got people working in corporates and all sorts. I would, if I were the listener and you're kind of liking the way John talks, is to contact him. We asked you to come on the show. This is not your stuff, because I just think you have a clarity of thought and can help a lot of people. So we're very appreciative of what you've done for us.
No, it's been a pleasure.
Absolutely.
That's it for this show. John, before you go, do you have a website? Do you know about websites? Have you heard of these things?
Several of them. No, I'm just decided. I was thinking this morning, I probably should put up a web page just in case you ask me this. So I've decided to name my new direction after my old dad who died 5 years ago. His name is Basil, Basil. So I'm going to call it basil.org.uk. So that leaves me about a day to make and publish a web page.
All right. You're on social media and LinkedIn as well, so just in case they can grab you there.
Not often, but yeah, a little bit.
Thank you to our listeners. I hope you've enjoyed the show. It's always a joy to have a sort of engaged and knowledgeable guest. So our thanks to John. Phil?
Thank you very much, guys. It's been a pleasure.
It's been lovely, John. So thank you for joining us. And if you want to contact us, we'll leave that at the end of the show. So thank you very much.
This is The Way We Roll, presented by Simon Minty and Phil Friend. You can email us at mintyandfriend@gmail.com or just search for Minty and Friend on social media. We're on Facebook, Twitter, and LinkedIn.